The title of the shiur, Who May Dwell on Your Holy Mountain? We have a Tehillim in chapter 15 where David HaMelech, he gives his own 11 rules. Now we have 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. David HaMelech had 11 categories, and the Gemara discusses how other people lowered it, and eventually till Habakkuk had one rule, and that is that tzaddik lives by his faith. Tzaddik emunato yechiyah. What we're going to study now is King David's 11 rules. Okay, we'll start from the beginning. We're on source 1, chapter 15. A psalm of David. Hashem, who may sojourn in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy mountain? If you fulfill these rules, then you can live on Hashem's holy mountain. Now, verse 2, one who walks in perfect innocence. So what does this refer to? The Gemara tells us this refers to Avram Avinu. Second, we continue, and does what is right. Who does this refer to? Abba Chilkiyahu. What did Abba Chilkiyahu do? When he was working in the fields and two rabbis came up to him and asked him questions, he would not respond. Why wouldn't he respond? Because he was working. He didn't want to take time off. He was getting paid by the day, by the hour, and he felt it was improper to even answer the Rabbanim when they came to ask him a question. And I continue on verse 2, and speaks the truth from his heart. Who does that refer to, the Gemara says? Who's a perfect example of that trait? Rabbi Safra. What did Rabbi Safra do? Well, there was a case, he was saying Shema Yisrael, but he was also selling an object at the time, and somebody came up to him and said, listen, okay, I'll give you $50 for your object. But he couldn't answer because he was in the middle of Shema. But in his mind, he said, fine, I'll take the 50. The man who was bargaining thought that he did not like 50, so he offered 55. Rav Safra, he said, listen, I already agreed after Shema. He said, I agreed in my heart 50, so I'm just taking 50. Even though he could have said 55, right? That's an example of somebody who speaks truth from his heart. All the more so whenever he says something, he keeps his word. Verse 3, who has no slander on his tongue. Who was this? The Gemara says, Yaakov Avinu. His mother tells him, go trick your father, because I had prophecy, and I know you really are the one to deserve the bracha, not your brother. So what does he say? He says, what happens if my father feels me and finds out and accuses me of lying to him? Why does he say that? Because he knows he's not going to blame his mother. He's not going to say, Mom told me. He's going to take all the blame himself. So he's an example of somebody who has no slander on his tongue. He knew even if when he's put to the test, he's not going to squeal on his mom. And I continue on verse 3. Who has done his fellow no evil. The Gemara explains, one who does not compete unfairly with his business rivals, nor cast disgrace upon his close one. Now verse 4. A despicable person is repulsive in his eyes. Somebody who's disgusting, well, this person is repulsed by that person. He can't stand that person. Chizkiyahu the king. Hamelech Chizkiyahu. Why? Because he had a father who was wicked. His father was Achaz, King Achaz. And King Achaz led the Jewish people astray to Avodah Zarah, idol worship, etc. When he took over the reins of power, he took his father and he dragged him through the streets of Yerushalayim to his burial place. And this is an example of this quality that a person should have, is that somebody who is despicable should be repulsive in one's eyes. Number one, it was his father. You would think Kibud Av V'Em, right? He's supposed to honor his father. But he has a greater obligation to honor God. And number two, he's the king of Israel. He was the king of Israel. Doesn't matter. He was against the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore a person is supposed to be against him. And this is an example. The example is Chizkiyahu. There's a few more other traits. We're not going to get into it because that's not the topic of the talk. But at the very end, the very last sentence says, the doer of these shall not falter forever. Somebody who keeps these 11, and the Gemara goes so far as to say even one. If you just keep one of them perfectly, that person will never fall. Or if he falls, Rashi says he will be able to get up. So I want to spend the rest of this shiur discussing this concept of hating despicable people, finding them repulsive in your eyes, etc. Let's go to source 2. This is the Talmud Bavli Masechet Makot. King David came and reduced them to 11. The 613 commandments he reduced to 11. As it is written, a psalm of David. Lord, who can sojourn in thy tabernacle? Who can dwell in thy holy mountain? And then the Gemara goes through each one of the 11. And then it comes to a despicable person is repulsive in his eyes. This refers to Chizkiyahu, the king, who had his father's remains dragged upon a pallet made of ropes to his burial place. Source 3. The Gemara in this source here discusses the chidushim that Chizkiyahu made. Of course, there's halachas in the Torah, and the rabbis tell us how to behave. Chizkiyahu came up with 6 original ideas. 3 of them, the rabbi said, were good, were very good. 3 of them were bad. Tana Rabbanan, Shisha Devarim Asa Chizkiyahu HaMelech. 6 things Chizkiyahu HaMelech did. Al Shlosha Hodulo. 3 of them the sages agreed with. Al Shlosha Lo Hodulo. And 3 of them they did not agree with. Al Shlosha Hodulo. The 3 they did agree with. Ganaz Sefer Refuot V'Hodulo. He had this book of medical healings. How to heal all types of diseases. It existed. And what did Chizkiyahu do? He buried it. Why? Because he saw the people of Israel depending on it and were not praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he said, this is not a good thing. And so he buried it, put it in the Geniza. The rabbi said, you did a good thing. The second thing he did, he took that snake, that copper snake that God told Moshe Rabbeinu to make. When the Jewish people in the Midbar were bitten by snakes, the remedy was to put this up in the sky and to look at it, and they would be healed. He took it, he ground it up, and destroyed it. Why? Because he saw the Jewish people making an idol out of it. And he said, this is no good. The rabbi said, you did a good thing. The third thing he did, as you know already, he took his father's bones, Girer Atzamot Aviv al Mitah Shel Chavalim. It's in bold. He dragged the bones of his father on beds of ropes. V'hodulo. The Chazal say you did a good thing. These 3 things you did good. Al Shlosha Lo Hodulo. 3 things were not good. Satam Me Gichon. He stopped up the waters of the Gichon. Why? He was being attacked by an enemy, Sancherev, and he didn't want them to get any water. And so he stopped up the water supply. It appears that it was a lack of faith. Since the prophet told him that he would win, there was no reason for him to stop up the waterway. 3, the next one, which is the 4th one. Katzatz dlatot heichal v'shagram lemelech Ashur. As soon as he became king, he cut off all ties to Sancherev. Sancherev was a world power, And when world power, well, they want money. You give us money and we'll protect you. It's protection money, like the mafia. So what happened? As soon as he became king, he cut off all ties with Sancherib because he wanted the Jewish people just to rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't want any alliances. And the prophets basically approve of this. We, the Jewish people, need to rely on Hashem, not make any treaties with major powers to protect us or make deals. God protects us. So he did a good thing there. But what happened? Sancherib came and exiled the 10 tribes, the northern kingdom. Then Sancherib came and conquered the cities of Yehuda one by one until he got to Yerushalayim. Chizkiyahu got a little bit wheezy. It's not working. Something's not working right here. And he said to Sancherib, what can I do? What can I give to you? What kind of bribe money can I give you so that you will let Jerusalem, you will spare Jerusalem? So Sancherib came up with a huge amount of money he wanted, amount of gold, amount of silver. Chizkiyahu, figuring he had no choice, took all the gold and silver out of the king's treasure, took all the gold and silver out of the Beis HaMikdash, and he's still short. He had to cut the doors off of the Beit HaMikdash that were plated in gold, and that he all sent to Sancherib. What did Sancherib do?
Probably attacked us.
Yeah. No good. You paid, but I don't care. I'm coming after you anyway. Just shows you what a treaty with these foreign powers are worth. When he cut off the doors, the rabbi said, bad deal, bad thing you did. The doors of the Beit HaMikdash you're going to give to Sancherib? What happened in the end? 185,000 troops of Sancherib gathered around the cities of Yerushalayim to destroy Yerushalayim. The majority of the inhabitants of Yerushalayim were for surrender. 130,000 were for surrender. Chizkiyahu only had 110,000 in his faction. He was worried. He thought maybe the majority rules. Isaiah, the prophet, came to him and said, listen, you go with Hashem. These are wicked, these are Risha'im, and they don't count. I don't care if they're the majority. You keep your faith in Hashem and pray to Hashem and rely on Hashem. So that's what he did, even though he had the majority against him. On Seder night, after the Korban Pesach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu performed a miracle and sent an angel down to kill all 185,000 Assyrian troops that were surrounding the old city. Yeah, in one night. And he could have been Mashiach Chizkiyahu, but he blew it. He cut the doors of the Beit HaMikdash. And so he could not be Mashiach. And he did not sing Shira. Rashi brings down, and Rabbi Kahana brings down also, the reason is because he cut the doors. But the Gemara also mentions that he did not sing Shira. He should, like Moshe Rabbeinu, when all the Egyptians were found dead on the seashore, he sang Shira, Az Yashir. Chizkiyahu did not sing Shira, even though all the dead were right in front of him, all the enemies, 185,000. You would think he would have sung Shira. Exactly why he didn't sing Shira is for another class. Next. Ibor Nisan benisan v'lo hodulo. He realized that Korban Pesach is coming up, and there wasn't enough time to prepare. So what did he do? On the last day of Adar, he decided to make another month, Adar Bet. Now, normally that would have been a good idea, except he waited to the last moment. And the halacha is, on the last day of Adar, you cannot then make Adar Bet. So the rabbi said, you broke the halacha here. That's not a good thing you did. But what do we do see? He dragged the bones of his father through the streets of Yerushalayim, and he was praised for it. Okay, we go to the next page, page 2. Number 4, Rashi. Rashi on this Gemara explains, Girer atzamot aviv. He dragged the bones of his father. Lefi shehaya rasha, because he was a rasha. Achaz, his father, was a rasha. Bazahu, he disparaged him, he disgraced him. V'lo nahag bo kavod b'kvurato lotzio kehogen b'mitot zahav v'kesef. And he did not deal with him honorably at his burial to take him out in a proper way in beds of gold and silver, like usually kings are buried in. 5, attitude towards the wicked. We have a Mishnah, and it's the following. Shmitatan shel rishaim hana'a lehem v'hana'a leolam. The death of the wicked is a benefit for them and a benefit for the world. But the death of the righteous is bad for them and bad for the world. Why is the death of the wicked good for the world? Because there's no more wicked person doing wicked things. And that's good. So it's good for them because now they're not doing any more wicked things anymore, and therefore they're doing less wicked, and doing less wicked things is a good thing for a person. And it's good for the world because we don't have this Russia here anymore in this world. The next, in English down, in English, third line, wine and sleep are a benefit for the wicked and a benefit for the world. If a Russia sleeps, that's good. He's not sinning. If he's drinking wine and gets drunk, that's good. He's not sinning. But for the righteous, it's bad for them, bad for the world. Dispersal of the wicked is a benefit for them and a benefit for the world. If we scatter them, that's good. When people get together at a conference or classes, etc., it gives energy to each other, and they end up doing more things.
UN.
The next line down. Convening of the wicked is bad for them, bad for the world. Right? Next line. When the wicked are at ease, it's bad for them, bad for the world. But when the righteous are at ease, it's a benefit for them and a benefit for the world. Source 6. Now, if we look in Megillah Ta'anit, what's Megillah Ta'anit? Megillah Ta'anit is a very early source. It was written by Chazal during the Second Temple period. It was the first type of oral law that was written down, and it was only about the holidays. They wrote a book about the months and the holidays in the months, and that because it was rabbinic in nature, and they didn't want to write the Torah oral law down because Jews really originally were not allowed to write down Mishnah oral law. That was supposed to be transmitted from person to person, but because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi thought it was going to be forgotten, so he wrote it down. Before that, though, was written Megillah Ta'anit, and that was rabbinical law. They felt more comfortable writing that down. So this book of Megillah Ta'anit tells us the different holidays that existed and some background information. Source 6, Megillah. Batrin b'Shvat, Yom Tov Delo Lemisped. And if you turn the page, we'll read it in English. The second day of Shvat, it is a holiday that you do not make eulogies. Why was the second day of Shvat a holiday? Because the Gemara there explains. On the first day of Shvat, Herod died, and on this one, King Yanai died. It is a happiness before the HaKadosh Baruch Hu when the wicked are removed from the world. That's an important concept. When the Rishaim are removed from the world, there's happiness before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then it goes on to explain that they made a holiday when Yanai died. King Yanai was a wicked king. He was a king during the Maccabean period. He was one of those descendants of the Maccabees who went off. And we'll read it in English. They said, when Yanai the king got sick, he seized 70 elders from the elders of Israel. He took them, imprisoned them in jail, and he said to the chief of the prison, if I die, kill these sages. seeing that Israel will rejoice, now they will be sad with the fate of their rabbis. He knew the Jews are going to celebrate when he dies. So he said, let's take 70 rabbis. When I die, you kill them. Then the Jews aren't going to be so happy on that day. But King Yanai had a very good wife, Shlom Tzion Hamaka. They named a street after her in the center of town. So what did she do? When her husband died, she took off his royal ring from his hand and she sent it to the chief of the prison. She said to him, your master, King Yanai, due to a dream, he released the sages, released them. He let them out and they went to their homes. Afterwards, she, Shlom Tzion Hamaka, said King Yanai died. She announced he died. And on that day that King Yanai died, they made a holiday. So King Yanai was right about that. They were very happy when he died. Source 7, King Herod. Herod, as you know, refurbished the Beit HaMikdash, made it very, very beautiful, beautiful building. Nevertheless, he was very wicked, did a lot of sins. And when he died, they had made it a Yom Tov also. Why did they make it into a holiday? Because it is a happiness before Hashem when the wicked are removed or depart from the world. There was an incident where Herod became sick. Same thing, exactly like Yanai. He knew because 60 or so years before they celebrated Yanai's death, so he figured that's going to happen to me too. So what did he do? He tried the same trick. He seized all the Torah sages and imprisoned them in jail. He gave the order, if I die, kill them all. Then they will see how these Jews are going to be happy or not. When the great men of Jerusalem heard this, they beseeched the head prison guard till the point when Herod died, the prison guard, released the Torah sages. He sent them to their homes in peace. On the day that Herod died, they made it into a Yom Tov. Every year on that day, they celebrated his death. Okay, let's do page 4. The top of the page, source 8. The Maccabees. The way the Second Temple period worked, it was 420 years. The first 34 years, the Persians controlled Eretz Yisrael. For the next 180 years, the Greeks controlled Eretz Yisrael. Then the Maccabean period was 103 years, and during that period, there were still Greeks in the land, but the Maccabees fought them and were able to push them out. When they were able to push them out, they had a problem because there were Jews that were there that were Hellenists. They were Hellenists. They accepted the Greek way of life, and they were a big problem for the Jewish people. So the Maccabees, after they got rid of the Greeks, they gave these Jews 3 days to do tshuva, and seeing that they didn't do tshuva in 3 days, they killed them. And they made a holiday. And that's source 8. So let's read it inside the Gemara. Because the Greeks were present in Eretz Yisrael, the Jews could not send their hand against the wicked among them until the Greeks left. They waited 3 days to see if they would do tshuva, but they did not. When they saw that they did not do tshuva, they deliberated about them and killed them. The day they killed them, they made it into a Yom Tov. And that's the 22nd of Elul. And that was a holiday every year during the Second Temple period. Source 9. What's the halacha about mourning? Usually, when a person's relative dies, we mourn. We sit shiva, etc. But we don't always sit shiva, and the Rambam tells you the times that you're not supposed to sit shiva. I'll read it in English, source 9. We do not conduct mourning rites for all those who deviate from the path of the community. People who throw off the yoke of the mitzvahs from their necks and do not join together with the Jewish people in the observance of the mitzvahs, the honoring of the festivals, or the attendance of synagogues and houses of study. So somebody who pulls himself away, doesn't want to be part of the Jewish people, the religious life of the Jewish people, then he is not to be mourned. Next paragraph. Instead, these people, they are like free, independent people like the other nations. They do what they want. They don't feel bound by the Torah at all. This is who we're talking about. Similarly, we do not mourn for heretics, apostates, and mosrim. People who do not believe in the Torah, people who try to lead people astray, mosrim, people who hand over Jewish property to the non-Jews, Jewish property or Jews themselves over to non-Jews. These kind of people we do not mourn. Mosrim, people who hand over Jews or Jewish property to the Gentiles. Instead, what are we supposed to do if you happen to have a relative like this? Instead, their brothers and their other relatives wear white clothes, robe themselves in white, eat, drink, and celebrate. For the enemies of the Holy One, blessed be He, have perished. That's the halacha. Concerning them, it says in Tehillim, those who hate you, God, will I hate. King David said this, Hashem, I hate those that hate you. As we're going to see, the next source. Source 10, Tehillim. What does King David say? Let's read it in English. Do not I hate them, O Lord, that hate you? And do not I strive with those that rise up against you? I hate them with the utmost hatred. I count them as my enemies. So if you have somebody, let's say ISIS, the terrorists, Hamas, these are our enemies, right? Well, King David is saying, of course those are my enemies, but enemies of you, Hashem, even though they're not doing anything against me, but they're against you, Hashem, I count them as my enemies too. And I hate them with the utmost hatred. Let's say a person has a family, and he has his father, which he respects and he honors, but he has a brother who disrespects his father and tries to get the other brothers to disrespect the father. So if you're a good person, unfortunately you have a brother like this, but you hate your brother because he's showing such disrespect to your father, and he's trying to get the other brothers to go against the father. It's not the right way to behave. So my allegiance is to my father, not to my brother. My first allegiance is to my father. Same thing. Our first allegiance is to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If we happen to have a relative like this, or somebody bad among our people, well, God comes first. A person can always do tshuva. But let's say they died and they didn't do tshuva. That's what we're talking about. One is that we give every Jew a chance to do tshuva, but if they don't and they refuse, our allegiance goes to our Father in heaven, and therefore these people that show disrespect and try to get the other Jews to go against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we need to hate them. We need to hate them. And it could be one of the serious problems we have today is that we do not hate these evil people enough. Because if you hate them, then you're moved to action. Alan Dershowitz, years ago, wrote this article for the Jerusalem Post. I read it. He says the importance of hate. You need the hate. Hate is an important emotion because it gets you moving. It gets you moving into action, and that's all part of it. It's just human psychology. No, we hate him. We're supposed to hate him. At the same time, we want him to do tshuva. So what we do, and the Chofetz Chaim is going to deal with this in a moment. Let's just wait, and he's going to answer that question: how to approach such a person. Why? What does King David say? Do I not hate them, O Lord, that hate you? Do not I strive with those that rise up against you? I hate them with the utmost hatred. I count them as my enemies. Okay, now we're on source 11, page 5. Avot Rabbi Natan. It says in the Torah, Havta l'recha kamocha. You should love your beloved as yourself. There's an implication there that there's somebody to hate, right? If you're supposed to love your beloved, so it doesn't say you're supposed to love everybody. You're supposed to love your beloved. So who are you not supposed to love? And that's what the Rabbi Natan is dealing with. We'll read it in English. You shall love your beloved as yourself. To what extent is hatred forbidden? One should not say, love scholars but hate students, love students but hate ignoramuses. One must love everyone, hating only heretics, inciters to heresy, and informers. As King David said, O Lord, do I not hate those that hate you? I hate them with the utmost hatred. I count them among my enemies. Then it continues and it says, but does it not say, love your neighbor as yourself? I am the Lord. How can one hate these when it says we must love our neighbor? The answer is that God said, I am the Lord who created him. If he conducts himself in the way required of our people, you must love him. Otherwise, you must not. If a person acts like a Jew, then you're supposed to love him. If he doesn't do the actions that he's supposed to do as a Jew, then you're not supposed to. That's what Avot Rabbi Natan is explaining us. Source 12. Chofetz Chaim on the definition of an apikoros, because there's laws of Lashon Hara, but that does not apply to everybody. Right? It does not apply to an apikoros. And the Chofetz Chaim explains in English. And all this prohibition of Lashon Hara, this is specifically on a man that according to Din Torah, he is considered in the category of your people. That is a people that is with you in Torah and mitzvot. But these people that you recognize that they have heretical views, it is a mitzvah to disparage them and shame them, whether before them or not before them. In whatever he says about them or hears about them, it is written, one should not aggrieve a member of his people. So the emphasis on his people. Do not be a tattletailer among your people. Emphasis people. They are not included in this because they do not do the deeds of your people. And it says, do not I hate them, O Lord, that hate you, and do not I strive with those that rise up against you, etc. And we continue on the next page. And an apikoros is a denier of Torah and prophecy of Israel, whether written law or oral law. Even if he says all the Torah is from heaven, except one sentence, or one kal v'chomer, or gzer shava, or one dikduk, he is included in this category. If he does not believe in the entire Torah, then he's an apikoros. And therefore, Lashon Hara rules do not apply to him, the Chofetz Chaim says. 13. This is also from the Chofetz Chaim. He was talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, and he said, of course Moshe Rabbeinu hated Datan and Aviram. Datan and Aviram, you know, they were troublemakers in the Midbar, and eventually the earth opened up, and boom, they went down there with Korach, etc. So the Chofetz Chaim is saying, of course Moshe Rabbeinu hated them because they hated God. And we're going to see that here. We're on now source 13 in English. Hate. And Moshe Rabbeinu, peace be unto him, certainly also hated them, Datan and Aviram. As it is written, do not I hate them, O Lord, that hate you. And they certainly are included in the haters of God. They wanted to push away all of Israel from the Torah of Hashem. They denied his holy prophecy and the going out of Egypt, which was by the hand of Hashem. Because Datan and Aviram said to Moshe, you took us out of Egypt, instead of saying God took us out of Egypt. So they even denied that Hashem took the people out of Egypt. And they overturned the bowl on its mouth when they said, why are you haughty over the congregation? They took Moshe's humbleness and they turned around and said, no, you are haughty because you're ruling over us. You're no humble person. They took his good midah and turned it over. So we see here from this source that, of course, anybody who is against Hashem, we have to hate. And of course, Moshe Rabbeinu hated Datan and Aviram. 14, Biur Halacha. This answers Shalom's question. This is also the Chofetz Chaim. I'll read it in English. But if this good Jew is standing in a place that has apikorsim, that rise up against the Torah and wish to enact some regulations in the matters of the city, and by means of this they will bring the people to transgress the will of God, and he, the Torah Jew, opened in peace, and his words were not obeyed. So, for example, you're at a city council meeting, and they want the restaurants open on Shabbat, and they want whatever they want, right, to go against the laws of God. So you're obligated to open up in peace, in shalom. Try to convince the person not to do this. But if the person doesn't listen, it is a mitzvah to hate them and quarrel with them and nullify their plotting with all that he has the ability to do. And King David, peace be unto him, said, and you know what he said already, do not I hate them, O Lord, that hate you? And do not I strive with those that rise up against you? I hate them with the utmost hatred. I count them as my enemies. This is the Chofetz Chaim who lived in the 1920s, 1930s, not so long ago. 15, source 15, also the Chofetz Chaim. In the Bir Halacha, Siman 329, that it is permissible to curse a wicked Jew. Why? For it is written, and a leader of your nation do not curse when he does the action of your nation. That's the Chiddush here. That's how the Gemara explains it as well. Do not curse a leader of your people or your nation. When they act like they're part of the nation, when they act like they're part of the people, then you're not allowed to curse them. But if they're not, curse them. Source 16. This is the last part here. Even Rav Tzvi Yehuda, who in the Cook camp is very tolerant towards the sinners. When he was asked about Ben Gurion, this is what he said. So you can. I'm just going to go to the last paragraph. This is Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, Rav Kook's son. And this is printed in those blue pamphlets that Rav Shlomo Aviner puts out. Also by Ben Gurion, this calculation is complicated. Whether he's a tzaddik, whether he's a rasha, how he fits in. On one side, heresy, wickedness, and materialism is on this wicked side. And on the other side, there are some positive things. Chazal say, why did Omri merit kingship? Omri was a king in Israel. Because he added a city in Eretz Yisrael. So here too, Ben Gurion added, he built, he was very big in building up the Negev, etc. And so too, also for Ben Gurion has a part in building Israel. But his heretical side complicates the calculation of his good points in building the land. The times he served as prime minister, a few times I was zealous for his honor. Even though, on the other hand, there was a need to fight against him, since it is necessary to have a correct relationship to a person that carries the name of the Israeli prime minister. It is necessary to fight on what is necessary without compromise, but together with this, not to harm him. Why not to harm him? Because Rav Tzvi Yehuda held, because he was the Rosh HaMemshalah and he represented Israel, so therefore he had a special status not to interfere with that title that he had. Not everybody would agree, but this is how he held. All this is when he is prime minister, says Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook. But now he is no longer prime minister, right? His term is over. And we are left with many defects, very many negative things that he did. Lastly, in relation to Torah and holiness, he was a heretic. He was an apikoros. So even Rav Tzvi Yehuda called it a spade a spade. The guy was a heretic, he's an apikoros. Yeah, that's it. When he was prime minister, we had to show him some respect. Now, he's no longer prime minister, we don't have to show him any respect.
That would include Perez.
Everybody can judge for themselves. Draw your own conclusions. Do I have any questions? Now, please, you can keep these if you want. If you have any questions, you can email me. My name's on the first page and my email address. I appreciate any comments.